Thank you. Good morning. Hi. I'm Tricia Gerrodette. I'm your facilitator for today's service. First, please turn off those cell phones if you have them with you, or turn them to vibrate at least. I did that already. Yay. If you have an announcement for now or a joy or sorrow to read a bit later, please fill out forms that are on the table in the back of the sanctuary, and someone will bring them up to me. I want to welcome everyone who is here in person, but we would like to also welcome those on Zoom. So if you are willing and able, please rise, turn in your seats, and wave at that camera, and the people on Zoom can see us as he pans the sanctuary. If you're new here, please feel like you can ask any of us how to access the website or how to find out how to get involved in our activities. And if you'd like to receive our newsletter, you can have your name added to the list to get that. We do have a few announcements this morning. Let's see. Freethinkers will meet today, the usual 1 p.m. Tina will not have office hours this Tuesday because she will be away at the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Institute, an event that happens only every few years to give ministers more training. You may reach out to her by phone, text, or email, although I personally would encourage you to refrain, and she will get back to you as soon as she can, which may mean after a class or worship. Truly Mindful Tuesday Meditation, though, will meet on Tuesday, January 27th at 11 a.m. Thank you to Django Sanders, who always attends to hold space for others who come as well. So, let's see. We have an announcement from Richard. If you lost some keys, please see Richard Spencer. They were found in the parking lot. There are items on the lost and found table in the community room that need to be claimed. They are soon to be moved to the free side. And from there, they go to Goodwill. So check those things. An announcement from Judy Riddle. Concerned citizens can call and leave messages with our elected official representatives. They are required by law to log these comments. Perhaps a daily call is needed at this time in the spirit of democracy. And she's compiled a list of our 2 senators who cover everybody, and Representative Juan Ciscomani, who covers most of us, but also Representative Adelita Grijalva, who covers some of the members in our community. So Judy says she'll have these in the community room for those who want to pick up the information. I have an announcement that 3 people, at least at the moment, have decided to stand every day from 4 to 5 p.m. on Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway in Sierra Vista in front of Lowe's, but it would be along the parkway. And they invite, that would be near the car wash, but west of it. So they invite people to join them. They're planning to do that every day from 4 to 5. All right. A protest for whatever issue you would like to have a sign for. All right. That is all my announcements, I think. So now we will move into the chalice lighting. Chalice lighting reading is The Spirit of Water by Katie Savani Gelfand. We light this chalice as a symbol of reunion. We reunite in this sanctuary to share the flow of our hearts with one another. We gather together in ritual to celebrate our fountains of joy, to hold each other through storms of grief, to guide one another through rapids of transformation, to rest together on ponds of stillness. Together, we honor the spirit of water, its many forms, and its life-giving essence. We are a caring congregation and share what gives us joy and what weighs heavily on our heart. I will read the joys and sorrows I have here. There are quite a few, actually. And then add a stone to our water for each one. Are there any more in the back? Put in? Oh, okay. If people on Zoom would put joy or sorrow in the chat, we will find them and read them out loud. So, I'll start with the one from Tina. She had written it up last night. 37-year-old Alex Jeffrey Preddy was shot and killed by ICE agents in Minneapolis yesterday. He was trying to help a fellow protester who had been knocked down. From every angle I could watch this event, he was held down by several people when one of the officers stepped back and shot him several times. He may have had, I think we know he did, have a gun that he had a legal permit to carry, but he posed no threat to ICE when he was shot. From Wally Hoggett, sorrow and anger and outrage for the killing of Alex Preddy, and sorrow and anger and outrage for the killing of ICE's next victim. From Heather Borman, joy in Tim Walz's courage to defy the state terror in Minneapolis and represent the concerns of his constituents.
Yes.
Tina says, we continue to mourn the death of another 37-year-old at the hands of ICE agents, Renee Good. And before I change trajectory, I have these tea lights that are battery driven, and I was putting one in my window for 2 weeks for Renee Good. And I just turned it off 2 days ago, and now I will put 2 candles in my window. And I have some extras. I do not need these. I will put them outside. If people want to take one or two home, please feel free. And we have a joy from Richard. The Arizona Wildcats men's college basketball team. It is at a record 20 wins and 0 losses so far this season, after defeating the West Virginia Mountaineers yesterday. They are one of only 3 undefeated teams. They play BYU tomorrow night. Will the Cats stay undefeated, or will BYU hand them their first loss of the season? Turn off the news and turn on the sports channel to find out.
Something better than the news.
I've added the rest of the stones for all the people who have been affected, injured, hurt by actions and tear gas. When I came here in January 1995, I was already an environmentalist and active in a number of issues. And the issue I wound up taking on as my key issue was water and the San Pedro River specifically. There had already been a lot of actions taken and words shared, and so I had to catch up on all of that history and read a lot of the background for that. There are also many books written about water, particularly water in the West. So one of the biggest ones is called Cadillac Desert. It's pretty dense. Not too many people take that one on unless you're a real water wonk. And it was first written in 1986 and was revised in 1993. So at least the edition I have, it may have been subsequently revised. But it's not most current with some of the things happening in the state, in the West and in Arizona. A man named Robert Glennon is a water attorney. He became, he made a name for himself at the University of Arizona in the Rogers College of Law. And he wrote several books. One of them is called, in 2002, is called Water Follies, Groundwater Pumping and the Fate of America's Fresh Waters. It has a fair amount about Arizona and mentions the San Pedro, but covers other parts of the country. He wrote another book in 2009 called Unquenchable, America's Water Crisis and What to Do About It. And here we are, 16 years later. Then in 2016, now a decade ago, a young woman wrote a book called Mythical River, Chasing the Mirage of New Water in the American Southwest. And the mythical river is indeed a mythical river. For many decades, some of the first explorers thought there was such a river called the San Buenaventura, which doesn't exist, but was created in the minds of many of the Spanish explorers. So they were searching for kind of an endless source of water, what they thought would be endless. I chose her words because I deal a lot in sort of facts and information, and that's what some of these other books are. They're not, I think that's not of as much interest to the general public as it is to me. And I chose this writer because I think she's more lyrical. In this landscape, water wants to go down. The San Pedro story is vertical. Long ago, the rising mountains of the Basin and Range province sent fans of alluvium into this valley, creating a vast permeable aquifer cradled between stone. Particles of silt and clay tumbled toward the basin's center, and over these dense sediments, the San Pedro River formed. Like commuters crossing and recrossing a border checkpoint, molecules of water flow freely between the surface and the floodplain aquifer, seeping down into the earth and welling up again where bedrock juts to the surface. Geography is complicated underground, harder to map. Drop a well anywhere in the San Pedro's basin, and you might find a spout of artesian water tunneling toward the surface, or you might find nothing at all. On average, it takes 1,000 years for a water drop to travel from the place where it disappeared underground, say the flank of the Huachuca Mountains, into the San Pedro River. But averages mean little here in this land of extremes. Some drops take 10,000 years to make the journey, while others require only the short span of a human lifetime. It's difficult to tell which wells pump subflow and which do not, because subflow is a myth created by Arizona lawmakers with no scientific grounding. All groundwater and all surface water eventually intersect if you wait around with the patience of a mountain. A law that recognized this hydrological fact would go a long way toward protecting the San Pedro River. A now famous 1997 study in magazine Nature calculated that the value of the world's ecosystem services averages $33 trillion a year, an eyebrow-raising number that still faces a firestorm of criticism in academic journals. The intricacies of this math have been debated up and down the halls of academia. But in fact, the calculation has little practical impact. The value of ecosystems lies almost entirely outside the market. The costs of destroying a place like the San Pedro accrue to a wide public in the distant future, not to a particular individual now. One can destroy the soil and still become rich. In fact, recent history suggests this is one of the quickest ways to wealth. We've long borrowed the language of economics for water. We speak of groundwater overdraft and talk of banking water underground. Adding the environment into our calculations is a brave and admirable act. By assigning economic value to resources that includes all the ignored and marginalized costs to neighbors, animals, ecosystems, and future generations, we can design market systems that more truly recognize nature's worth. But numbers are simply one language, one way of speaking and thinking among many. Despite living in a nation where water is essentially free, we've placed too much emphasis on economic worth. Studies have shown that while appeals to pocketbooks may help protect the environment in the short run, such appeals involve collateral damage. They activate our sense of extrinsic values: money, power, image, prestige. They bring out the worst in humankind. We should not be afraid of making arguments for places like the San Pedro based on intrinsic values: kindness, intimacy, a sense of belongingness. People act on such impulses every day. Most of us need no calculations to know that the natural world makes us rich in spirit, wealthy in the most material goods of all: soil, river, mountain, rain. The idea that everything can be reduced to a number impedes humanity's progress toward a society in which ethics, not economics, decide the bottom line, and the pursuit of wisdom, compassion, and community replaces the chase of the American dollar.
As I looked into water and how it juxtaposes with climate justice, I found groups of people out in the world who are sometimes technically called water protectors, part of the water protector organization, but some of them just naturally taking on the voice of the voiceless water that we use, that we consume. The very first one I ever knew was named Benjamin Harrison Schley. I've spoken about him before. He was my sister-in-law's father, and he was probably the best fly fisherman in the world when he was alive. He took Eisenhower fishing. He tried to teach the carters how to cast off into a pool. And he grew up in West Virginia. When he was a small boy, his father told his littler brother John, "I give you the rabbits. You are in charge of all bunnies." But what he said to Ben was, "Rivers are living things, treasures to love and cherish, the very lifeblood of our earth. But like all living things, they must be cared for and defended. The Potomac is our very own river, yours and mine," he said, "and one day it will be yours to watch over and care for." And he did. He was a fisherman, but he also worked in fisheries, and he also just worked to protect the rivers. If you know that area, there are a number that come together. He wished that West Virginia had been named Shenandoah. And last night, when I sat down to work on this sermon and gather everything I read into some meaningful whole, I found I was not alone in finding it difficult. I watched another UU minister who'd just come back from Minneapolis crying into her phone about what had just happened yesterday with the murder. And she found it very hard to sit down and focus, as did I. But when I look back through all my material, I realize I was dealing with people who, despite all odds, despite no hope of success, kept on going because it was important to protect people and to protect water. And so I wanted to share a few of their stories with us today, because as I felt helpless last night, I realized it's really not about whether you can succeed or not. It's that you have to do this. This is important for you, for all posterity. Some of the groups I encountered were in Ecuador, and a family had watched over a riverway for generations, calling themselves water protectors. This young woman sees herself as a water protector, and there are many Unitarian Universalist values, I believe, that come out in the book. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We are all related. We believe in the interconnection of the web of life. But what really struck me is this: water has its own spirit, Nokomis told me. Water is alive. I also really like that she says, we stand with our songs, with our dreams. We are still here. We are stewards of this earth. Something that Christianity, at its best, one of our sources, has given us, the idea that we are stewards, not consumers, of life here. And Robin Wall Kimmerer, we've spoken about a lot, in Braiding Sweetgrass, talks about the language we use even for animals that are animate, we usually give them the neuter tense. And how often do we use neuter in English? Not very often. Other languages use it all the time. I love how German does it for little girls. But we make anything living that isn't human neuter. And we talk about water as if it's an object. We don't see the living value of everything around us in the very language we use. And she wrote her book 11 years ago, and it has been teaching us, I hope, to see our connections more clearly, just as the book We Are Water Protectors did as well. And I look at, what's happened with DAPL, the Dakota Air Pipeline, and how it went through. It wasn't stopped. But we are still protecting. This group of people has been doing it for generations, and will we step up and start to protect? In the next slide, we look at Little Miss Flint, Mari Copley. She spoke up in Flint. In 2014, the water supply that supplies Flint was moved to a different source, a very polluted river. She found that her sister had a bad rash, and they all saw the effects of lead poisoning. And she spoke up. President Obama called her, visited her, talked to the people of Flint. They are still using the same water supply. But she has moved from using bottled water to filters. And she hopes to expand that to other people throughout the country, because Flint is not the only place dealing with toxic water. Despite not having the success she had hoped for, she has not given up. Then there are a group of people who call themselves water keepers. They are part of, the next slide. They are part of a group of people throughout the world who take part in keeping their waterways. Now, Dr. Michelle Ryan is the Hawkesbury Nepean waterkeeper. The Hawkesbury is a river right in the western part of Sydney, Australia. And she has an iconic creature. She has the platypus. And that has been helpful to at least get some attention. That part, 1 million more people will move into that part of Sydney in the next few years. It's undergoing rapid transformation, and she's working to try to protect waterways, wetlands along the river. She knows she can't stop all development, but if she can prove that there are platypus there, it gives her a better case. Platypus are nocturnal animals. She says for a large part of the year, she and her researchers themselves have to become nocturnal to study the movements of the platypus. But they're secretive. It's hard to find them. They have burrows. And if you do find them, you have to be incredibly careful with the males, because they have spurs that don't kill you, but cause the most painful reaction in human beings of any animal. And you may be in agony for weeks, if not months. So it's a really careful, delicate process to tag them, to figure out where they're moving. I know she's used drones, and she also uses something called environmental DNA. You collect the water and you process it and discover the DNA of the animals that flow through and drop scales or fur or pee. And you can collect the fact that they are there. And they've discovered through this process many more areas of the western suburbs of Sydney actually have platypus in their midst. Again, we don't know what that will mean in terms of legislation and change, but hopefully something. So what happens if you don't have an iconic animal, but you have an iconic waterway? So this is a really interesting podcast about protecting wetlands, how wetlands are being destroyed 3 times faster than forested areas. I hadn't realized that. One of the speakers, Liliana Guerrero, is from Colombia, and she's included because both of them were talking about migratory birds. And we know that what happens in Salt Lake City, the Great Salt Lake, is what I'm aiming for, the iconic waterway, is affected by what happens in Colombia and vice versa. If there is no path for these migratory birds, they have no place to stay, no way to keep alive on their journey. So they were working together, but what really interested me was Amy Wicks, who is the water protector of the Great Salt Lake, which has been decreasing in volume, which has many people around it because of the size of Utah and Salt Lake City. And this causes 3, if not many more, big problems. As water goes down, the dust on top of the barren land is brought into the wind and causes horrible toxic air pollution. It also, of course, means there's less habitat for wild birds. And finally, there's a type of shrimp, brine shrimp, that lives there that feeds the birds. The water becomes more saline as there is less of it, and the brine shrimp die off. So she's been trying to hold Salt Lake City to a level in the Great Salt Lake that could sustain everything. But she hasn't quite succeeded. Some years with more rain and more snow and more runoff, they've gotten close. But often they're 800 to 1,000 feet below the mark she wants to hit. And yet, nobody listens. And she keeps on. Finally, one really interesting body of water is the Puget Sound. If you have ever been, I have never been, but I know Seattle loves its Puget Sound. And they've discovered a chemical only in the last few years, clearly has been running into the sound, causing damage to the salmon, especially coho, but all salmon. It makes them zombies, and they die before they spawn. The crucial thing is to get them to the level where they will spawn, right? And unfortunately, 6 ppd is what makes your tires stable. In the 1950s, tires would disintegrate much more rapidly, not only leaving a mess on the highway, but killing people, right? So we need 6 ppd, and we can't just trade it for something new that might be equally horrendous. The only thing he has been able to offer, Sean Dixon, who is the Puget Sound keeper, is that if you put in ways, he says that living things will catch 6 ppd, including soil. And if you have swales, which we can see in the next slide, ways for water to run off, it can catch the 6 ppd as it flows through. But there are only certain places you can put swales. They're often used to slow fast-moving water, but if you have a really fast slope, that won't work. They also, take time to construct and to think up. We know that the community garden in Huachuca City, which we have been part of, had to find a way to catch the water coming in a similar fashion, so that the garden itself wouldn't be completely flooded. This is one possibility, but again, all these people are often working, some of them across continents, across the Western Hemisphere. There's a man in North Carolina working with people in Africa. There's a kind of clique, a good clique, of water protectors around the world trying to preserve and deal with the specific problems of their area. Usually our problem isn't too much water, of course, although it's kind of interesting to be talking about water today here. But we know that overuse of our water is a huge problem, as Tricia was explaining. I was really excited to read that our Attorney General for Arizona had an agreement with Riverview. It's a Minnesota-based dairy company that had moved into Cochise County, into the Wilcox area. And if you've ever been through there, you'll see a huge dairy farm. So they have an agreement which is supposed to use reduce their groundwater usage, allow 2,000 acres of land to be left fallow, and they're going to deliver $11 million to residents. Many residents have had their wells go dry and cannot pump deeper to get more. But that's not enough. I mean, it just is good. As I was talking to Tricia ahead of time, it's really good PR for the company and for our Attorney General, Chris Mays, but not adequate to address what is happening right here in Cochise County. I remember a few years ago hiking up to the Coronado Monument and looking out and seeing Mexico, whence comes our San Pedro. To think that it is a gift from Mexico and we are harming it and harming the flight path, again, of millions of migrating birds every year. What can we do? How can we be protectors? Well, I look back to the book, We Are Water Protectors, and it embodies so much. It embodies remembering that everything is alive and connected, remembering that we have to work together, remembering that we may have to do this across multiple generations. Maybe we need to think of ourselves as monarch butterflies. They never get to the end of the journey, right? Another generation takes on. How can we leave this for future people to take on? So I leave us with the hope that we will take courage, and that in the face of the terrible human rights violations happening in our country right now, we will not give up, even if it seems hopeless. We can take courage, work together, and remember, even if we don't see a possible good outcome, we have to try. Thank you.
Before I read the closing words, I want to add to what Tina had to say about the Great Salt Lake. And there was and is a corollary to that in the Salton Sea. And the Salton Sea has had the same problem with drying up and toxic dust, and it precedes the Great Salt Lake as an issue. But the community around the Salton Sea is not white like it is for the Great Salt Lake. And so it hasn't gotten the attention. The community is Hispanic, they're poor, and they've been suffering for many years from the toxic dust. So maybe some push from Great Salt Lake healing will also work for the Salton Sea. And also picking up on what Tina said about just doing the fight. I was interviewed by Sevigny, the author of Mythical River, and she asked me about why I did this. And I said, I hope the river doesn't die anymore in my lifetime. I don't know. But I do know that if we don't fight, it will die. Same concept. Our closing words in Chalice Extinguishing, Our Calling in the World by Reverend Dr. Rebecca Savage. Our closing words come from Reverend Dr. Rebecca Savage, the senior minister at the UU Congregation of Rockville, Maryland, a permanent member of the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and one who served previously as a military chaplain. We have come to the end of our service, but not our calling in the world. We close our time together with the humble reminder that justice and equity are our spiritual practices to embrace. Each day, every day, we are blessed to be the embodiment of what is possible when justice and equity ground us in all that we do. May we go forth with the light and warmth of our chalice in our hearts until we are together again.